Hello, welcome to Interaction Design, Modeling and Materials, Module 3 Tutorial 6, 3D Printed Selfie. Let's start by considering how the mesh is prepped for 3D printing. So the mesh we will be using for this tutorial activity is a combination of the model meshes created in week 11, activity 2. 3D scanning technology can create 3D models of people, larger objects, rooms, and environments as well, not just the small objects that we scanned. For this tutorial, we're going to be using a model mesh scanned also from a person using the same scanning process as activity 2. It is not required, but it does add a layer of reflexivity to the concept of a data portrait visualization. If your self-portrait exploration includes using your own likeness as a mesh object, it will be necessary to work with another person to scan you while you sit as the object being scanned. We will use a model mesh created using Scaniverse for this tutorial, but any 3D scanning app capable of exporting an appropriate editable file is acceptable. Textures are not going to matter for this process. In fact, they will start off a bit by getting in the way of the process, but we'll work around it. While there are 3D printing technologies that do print multiple materials, none are available to us on campus. So when we remove the textures from the models, you will see the quality of the 3D model will not be as high as the texture resolution makes it seem. If we were intending to create high-resolution models for 3D, we would need to use a higher resolution scanning process. Instead, we will work with the limitations of the scanning process and create a low-poly mesh object. This will function well as a reflexive gesture while acting as an introduction to 3D printing. Exporting the 3D model is specific. The mesh object begins as an exported file from Scaniverse. If you recall, on export, there are several options. We discussed different file types in the week 11 tutorial. The files we create in Scaniverse are not ready for printing, though. So although it allows us to export as STL, do not export it as STL. We will continue exporting models in OBJ. So if you are working from your OBJ models that you previously created, continue using those. If you are submitting a file to the Fab Lab, it will eventually be an STL file that you submit. But there is work to do preparing the model for 3D printing. If you intend to print the model yourself using a 3D printer in one of the labs, there are further steps required beyond exporting the STL. Preparing a file for 3D printing requires using software that converts the STL file into G-code. Each 3D printer model needs a G-code converted specifically for that model. We will use Cura, a program developed by Ultimaker, to import an STL file, adjust the way the file will print, select the exact printer to print the model, and start a 3D print. As we get started with 3D printing, we will use the following workflow. We're going to start with Meshmixer, we're going to move into Cinema 4D, and then we're going to move into Cura. Let's get started in Meshmixer. So here we are in Meshmixer, and I'm going to start off by dragging in a familiar object. This Totodile plushie is actually one of my son's toys. It's one of his favorite Pokemon, so it has some personal relevance to me as well. And we're going to here look at how we can do two things. We're going to prep the model the way we did before, just by analyzing it and fixing any of the problems. And then we can export it to go into Cinema 4D where we can edit it there. But I'm also going to keep it. I'm going to add another couple objects, including a self-portrait piece, and I'm going to show you how you could just do this project in Meshmixer, and it's up to you if you'd rather do that or go into Cinema 4D. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do in my edit and then transform, and then I'm going to go right into rotate, and I'm going to make it 90 degrees so we can see it. Step 1, accept the move. Okay. Step 2 is going to go into analyze, let's inspect, and you see there's some problems. Let's auto repair all those. Now, in this model, there are some issues that are showing there still, and I fixed those in Cinema 4D for the model that was used with Harold's not face mesh, the ML5 code that he built. But we're going to do things a little differently here. We're going to look at how we can sculpt it here. Before we do that, no, you know what? That's fine. We'll do it here. So I'm going to go into Sculpt, And in Sculpt, I'm going to actually use this sort of middle bubble fall off. And in Brushes, I'm actually going to flatten. Got the strength, for me it's set to 28, the size is set to 55. I may actually make that smaller. And similar to a bit of the work that we had done in Cinema 4D, I'm actually just going to flatten some of these spots, right? Some of these spots that are maybe standing out a little more than I would like. There we go. Just small fixes to things, but just so that they're not quite so obvious. And once we look at the actual object without the texture, you'll see that there's actually a lot more we can do with this. So maybe we'll actually do that. So I just wanted to show you how you can make some of those sort of, very basic adjustments. This next one is going to be a little more drastic. So in Edit, I'm going to go to Make Solid. Now, let me just explain for a second what solid means. Mentioned a little bit in the previous tutorial how digital products don't need to be solid because they can just be, they can have exposed polygons, and even though it's not good practice, it isn't going to actually affect how they work. Whereas with 3D printing, the object itself needs to have every polygon closed. So what does that mean? It means every edge of a polygon has to touch another polygon so that it's entirely closed. So if I go to Make Solid here, you can see that it really affects the way that the texture looks. And this is why Meshmixer is not good for creating sort of like a solid object and then exporting it to Cinema 4D for us to continue using, because it distorts the texture in such a way that it's not really as usable as it would be otherwise. But for what we're going to do, it will make sense. So in the prompts here, you can see the drop down is set to fast. You know what? I'm going to set that to Sharp Edge Preserve. This is important. Color transfer mode, no colors. All right, let's start there. I'm going to update. If you end up like this, where there's nothing on the screen, just scroll forward with your mouse wheel and it'll pop in. So here's the actual mesh. And this is one of the first times you get to kind of see this, right? This is what the surface looks like. And you can see that it's pretty amazing in general in the fact that this was created from cameras. However, it's really bumpy and not really a great surface on it. You can then, once you sort of accept that, you can go in to Sculpt, and using that exact same tool, I would maybe, you know what, that size will work for now, that strength will work for now. And you can see as I click, I'm smoothing down the surface. And you can very quickly see the difference between one side and the other. So I'm going to go over this whole object and give it a smooth. I'm leaving areas like around the eyes, just because even if I were to make this brush small, it still would not really work very well for that. This is just a very, very fast cursory effect, but it will remove detail, right? So it isn't good if you have like really good hair and stuff you want to keep. It's good if you want to remove detail. And in this case, because it's going to end up being a sort of low poly effect, you could probably get away without doing this altogether because it's low poly, but I wanted to just show you because depending on your model, this might actually make a huge difference. Good enough. So actually maybe we'll just get a little bit in the belly. All right, that's good enough. I can decide at this stage if I want to, and I would actually, I'm going to export this object. And at any point here, you should actually save your Meshmixer file. So I'm going to call this, actually, I'm going to just keep calling it, I'm going to keep working with the self-portrait. So in fact, I'm just going to call it self-portrait 2 in the Meshmixer, but I want to export the totodial. And we're going to export it, I'm going to call it totodial 3, and I'm going to export this one as the OBJ. Now, I don't want the materials, so I'm just going to export it as an OBJ without the materials. Great, so that's one object. Now, if you don't have this object browser, if it hasn't popped up, and it usually will as soon as you have more than one object that you're working with, if you go up into, we don't want that. If you go up into View, you can see the Hide Object browser, and then you can see Show Object Browser. Now, why does that matter? Because we have two objects now. We have the original object, and we have the new cleaned up object. So that original object that's there, we could choose to get rid of it if we wanted to. And it won't show up on my, let me see if I can kind of drag that. There we go. I was just close. If it really depends on exactly how large your screen is running. So if I click on that, I can now dispose of it, and I just have the one object. Okay. And it'll highlight when I touch it. So next thing I want to do is bring in another object. And so it'll basically end up placing it right on top of this object. And I would go to the import. And when I go to import, it's going to give you this pop-up window, which is append, replace, or cancel. Obviously, cancel means I've changed my mind. If you press replace, it will start a new project, close this project, and that isn't what we want to do here, unless what you're trying to do is to just prep the other, like a series of them that you're going to take into Cinema 4D and work with them there. But if you want to try this in Meshmixer, you would need to actually go to append, because what you're going to do is bring in another object. And in this case, the first one I'm going to bring in here is this shell. So just to bring in one of the other, sure, let's do that. Well, let me, now another thing you can do with this object browser is you can make objects visible or invisible. So let's make the totodial invisible while we then go in and take a look at the shell and see what we can do with it. So first thing we're going to do again is go into Edit, go into Transform, and we're going to rotate it. So it's set up. You can see that this version has all of the original pieces. It's got stuff that it tried to build in the background, plus it still has the photogrammetry image in it, right? So what, and this is the one that I had recorded that is in sort of that, there was like an extra tutorial video I created showing how to do a 3D object, a fully 3D object. So that's why I'm using this one in particular. So let me show you how you get rid of all that extra stuff here if you end up bringing it with you. So first we'll go to accept so that we have that. In select, you actually have the option of either using sort of a brush tool similar to in Cinema 4D or the lasso tool. And in the lasso tool, you can actually, you know, go around an object, and you'll know when you get it because this will change. If this doesn't work, you won't get this option. If you go to edit and discard, gone. Okay. Then you have to go back into select, select the lasso. I'm going to select this little piece up here, and it changed, so I can go to discard. It's gone. Next, let's go down into, let's see how we can get a nice line for the lasso tool. So I'm going to go to select, and I'm going to go to lasso, and again I'm going to run this. Selected it, edit, discard. There we go. So now we're kind of back in that similar situation where we have this object. I'm going to bring it down a tiny bit, just make it a little easier to work with for us. I'm going to accept that. And let's also then, of course, go into Analysis, Inspector, repair all the problems with it. right? So now hopefully the defects will survive what we need to do. It will not fill that hole because it had already sort of created edges around the hole. If this hole was actually polygons that were exposed, this would be a problem, but it won't be a problem with what we're doing anyway, okay? So what we do want to do though is we're going to go back into edit and we're going to make it solid. And when we make it solid, it's again going to change the texture quite a bit, but that's okay because we're going to go to edge sharpness, no colors. We're going to keep the rest and update it. Okay, so there's our shell. We can accept that. And when we accept it, you can see that now we have another object here, right? And if we do the turn it off, we'll actually see it's this object right here. So in fact, we want to go into that and we want to now delete it. So we now just have, again, the two objects. We have our totodile and we have our shell, and there's obviously a real discrepancy in size, and we're going to want to deal with that part next. So how about we let's reduce the size of our totodile. So I'm going to select the totodile, we're going to go to edit, transform, and we're going to we want to scale all sizes. I just realized, now I have done it here. So in the scale window, it's set to 1. I think I want it to be like 0.2. For me, 0.2. Let's see. Maybe a little too small. So let's go back in there. I'm going to transform it. So maybe instead of the scale, you know what? I didn't accept it anyway, so that's good. So maybe 0.5. Whoops. There we go. You know what? That will work for now for what I want to do with it. Here's the two objects. They're actually pretty close in size to each other in reality. And in fact, now that I think about it, you know what? I'm going to take it down a tiny bit more. So now its scale is, again, set to 1. And I want to set this to, how about, let's say, another 0.5. You know, it's probably smaller than it was before. You know what? It's going to work for what I want to do. So those are my first two objects, and I'm going to accept it. And now I'm going to bring in another object. So let's go to import. I'm going to append again. Now, I'm going to bring in a self-portrait. No, it's this one that I created with Scaniverse. It was just a really quick basic scan I did one day while it was nice. I had found that scanning outside really helped. It's a little cold to do that now, but it did help. And what we want to do here is I'm going to take this bust portrait and I'm going to show you how you can work with it right here in Scaniverse. So I'm going to close the other two. We're going to do the same kind of thing. We're going to do the edit, transform. Let's do 90 degrees so it's upright. I think I want the scale to be larger than the other pieces. Okay, so we can kind of move this around. You can see that it created this shell, right? So we have the same kinds of issues though. We're going to have to go into analysis. We're going to inspect. Lots of problems. Let's repair it. So much faster than Cinema 4D in repairing a mesh. Great. So now we've got this sort of cleaned up mesh. It's created some like big solid features like that there. Okay. So that's done. So what I was thinking of doing with this, actually, you know what? First, let's go to, let's make it solid. So we're going to go back to edit. We're going to make solid and it's going to reduce that, and that's fine. I'm going to accept it for now. And you can see immediately that it starts to create this already like a low poly kind of effect, right? Next step, I want to, I'm going to chop this. I want to chop this so that it's more of like a actual sort of bust. I'm using the bust in the very traditional sense of a bust, which is a sculpture of a person that is usually from the sort of shoulders, chest or shoulders up. Okay. And what I'm looking for is a really specific one, which is the plane cut. Now, in Meshmixer, you can use the plane cut to divide a piece off this way. So if I even go to about there, or I could even angle it if I wanted to, right? To like create more like drama for it. I don't want to. I don't think I want any drama with this one. I'm going to, and it's remesh and fill, which is, and I'm going to discard the part that I don't want. So when I hit accept, I now have this. And a nice enclosed piece like this that I can work with. So what can we do next? So I'm going to go in and do a little bit of that same kind of sculpting that we had done before. And I can go in, I'm going to make the brush size, definitely bring it down. And now, why is it doing that? Oh, because I have my old object underneath it. So let's get rid of this. Oh, did I get rid of the wrong one? I think I did. Yes, we're going to get rid of that one. There we go. Okay, so we've got our bust back, and now when I go into sculpt, oh, it's funny that it's still doing that. Why is it doing that? Because I'm on flatten, I'm on fall off, there's no color, strength is down. It seems to be just kind of a strange little effect going on there where it's adding a color. It didn't do that the last time, but that's fine. Maybe it's just sort of showing the polygons that are being directly affected. Yes, and then it disappears anyway. Oh, yeah, oh, you can see inside the mesh a little bit like that. So you can move around the object. You can choose how you want to smooth it. I'm going to smooth it a little bit in the forehead, take a little bit of that grumpiness out. Okay. I'm going to call that done for now. And so next I want to bring back my other object. So now I've got these two. Let's kind of see what it takes when we want to incorporate them. So I'm going to, let's bring the shell into the equation. So this idea of a mashup is interesting and conceptual in that these objects have meaning for me, and I'm now going to design something, that kind of plays with the idea of them being a part of me. Now I could incorporate them really specifically, like in parts of, this sculpture. I could add them all together. Like it could be, in fact, that might be, I'm going to look at a few different ways. So one is this, I'm going to incorporate it into the actual sculpture of my bust. I can even embed it in there where parts get sort of hidden in, right? I'm going to accept that. Let's get the totodile. I'm going to, let's move the totodile up and in and over. I could, if I wanted to, I could take one of the pieces. Let's go to the top. I want to see where it is. I could take one of the pieces and really kind of replace it. I could replace part of myself with the object. There's lots of different ways that I could choose to represent the parts of them that are parts of me, right? Right. So I'm just going to, for now, I'm just going to kind of like throw them there just to kind of show you an idea, and I can accept that. And some of the other things you can do in Meshmixer. So right now we've added these, objects that have been scanned from an external source, but I can also add things. So let's say I add a, looks like quite large here, but in fact, it's very easy to like scale this down to be something that is useful. Let's go to top. That way we can kind of like position it. So a bust often had these sort of like elevated pieces that would kind of hold them up. So that's what this is acting as. It's adding a bit of that sort of traditional concept. So here's the square or the cube, and I want to edit its size. So we're going to go into transform, and I'm going to do the same kind of thing. I'm going to bring it down. And see what we can do with it. So I'm going to kind of move it into place-ish. Let's angle it. Put it there. Okay. It's pretty close to where I'm thinking of it, although it is a bit big. but that's pretty good placement. So now I've got this kind of sculptural form that is using sort of the language of traditional bust, like a traditional sculpting kind of language. I don't like how that's working out. It's funny how it just won't get straight no matter what I do there. That's not too bad, but I have a little more of it to the front than the back, just, and that's, I don't have to. I absolutely don't have to. But it is not too bad for one way of showing how you could do this. Now, let's say this was what you wanted to do. We've got all these objects here, and you want to then go to the next step with them, and you wanted to export them. Sorry, I'm just thinking out loud about the two ideas I have in mind, and I think I'm going to accept that, but I think also I want to kind of show you both ideas side by side. So I'm going to transform this sort of like the whole object. I'm just going to move it over there. Now I'm going to accept that. I want to duplicate this object of all these pieces, and will it let me move them? Yeah, transform. And I want to have two of them. So I've got two of these busts. Okay, and I'm going to do a couple things here. So I'm going to get rid of that, and yeah, I'm going to get rid of that shape. I'm going to, let's transform this one. I want to make this one sort of that kind of size instead. Let's bring that up so you can kind of see the two of them side by side. I'm going to then grab, no, let's start with the bust. I'm going to put the bust in the middle, and I'm going to move it. So again, edit, transform, and let's sort of bring it over. It might help from the top. Yeah, I was already not putting it in the right place. Now you can see coordinate space. I'm in local. If we go to world frame, I can then easier like move this around based on that. So now it's kind of in the middle of this plinthy kind of thing. Let's go this way, and I'm going to bring it down. This is a little more of a contemporary kind of view where the plinth is nothing but a holder of objects. Okay, so I'm going to put that on there. I'm going to accept it. Then how about we take the shell, and I'm going to transform that position as well. I'm going to bring it over here, maybe bring it back, maybe tip it back, bring it on, and have it now. That may give me some problems down the road. I may then just sink that right in there so it's in. Okay, and but I will accept it, and then I'm going to go to the totodile, and I'm going to edit the totodile, and I'm going to transform. Oh, you know what, let's go to the top. I kind of want to make the totodile a little bigger this time, but I don't know, we'll see. Go to the front, let's bring the totodile down, and I think I'm going to have to accept that just for a second. It's getting a little busy to be able to see things. Yeah, actually. So now I've got this sort of collection of the two objects, and I could put more objects on here. The issue is that if I want this to be solid, then they all have to be touching this way. And if depending on how I place them on the object, I could have lots of problems later on when I'm 3D printing. And you'll see when I incorporate this into G-code, or when I incorporate this into Cura to make G-code, you'll see that it will have to make all sorts of scaffolding pieces to hold up the glue, because the glue does not float in the air. The glue has to be placed on another piece. And when it's big, like say the bottom of this base, or even this bottom sort of plinth that's holding things, you'd find that it's very easy to do that because it's just layer on layer on layer on layer. But if you have a layer here like my chin sticking out, it needs to prepare for that layer way down here at the bottom, and it will add scaffolding, which is just material that is meant to only get it up to this point, where then it uses good material to build the rest of it. And it will need to do that for any overhang. So this is an overhang. These little arms are overhangs. There's going to be a lot of overhangs on a piece like this, right? Now, let's, as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking about that the plinth to me feels a little big. Now, I actually want it to be a little bit thinner for this, and I'm going to just bring it back up like that. Let me take a look around. I like that more. Now I've got this sort of incorporated thing going on. Maybe one down. This incorporated thing going down between these objects. So what if I just wanted to take this and go directly to 3D printing? What would I need to do? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back up my object browser. I'm going to just make sure, so that's that one over there. So I'm going to actually select all of those. And I'm going to combine. Yes, so we're going to combine those together. And you can see now those are combined into one object. I'm then going to select all of these and I'm going to combine, and they're going to be combined in another object. So now you can see I only have 2 objects in here. And the last thing, because I could export it like this and it would print it. Oh, you can see the problem with that. Yikes. So this object, ooh, okay. I'm going to actually just quickly go back. If you can't see what's going on there that I went woof about, it's that this object is not fully connected. This has to be embedded in this. So when I made this cube smaller, I messed up. And so let's go back to transform. I'm going to make it thicker again. A little bit anyway, maybe not as much as it was. Let's look around. Now see that totodile is floating. So let's grab the totodile. Let's edit him and drop him down. That's fine. I'm just going to sort of sink them right in there so you can see the 3 pieces. And I'm pretty sure that the shell has no part that's not touching. So now they're all touching. I'm going to select them again. I'm going to go back to combine, and the 3 of them are combined. So for this portrait, if I decided that I wanted to really make this low poly, I'm going to show you an option here. I could export this just like this, and it would 3D print like this. And I'm not sure that's as much fun as what I'm going to show you, which gives it a really sort of 8-bit kind of digital look. So in the Make Solid option, you can see that it goes back to trying to add some color into it, the automatic. We're going back to no colors. Choose blocky, update. And you can see that it now takes on this really fun kind of 8-bit look, right? And you can actually decide on solid accuracy how pixelated you want that to be. So here you can see it's a little bit lower pixelation, right? And I'm going to just leave that just like that, okay? And so these are going to perhaps be like the 2. Actually, no, you know what? I want to do the other one as a different pixelation. So that's the 1. I'm going to just... yeah, I'm going to select this one, and we're going to go back to edit, make solid, and we're going to go to no colors and blocky again. Oops. And this one, we're going to maybe choose a more blocky look. And now you can see the difference between these, and it is possible for it to get so abstracted that it loses sort of what those things are, and it's a matter of trying to find the balance between them. Okay, I'm going to select that one, and we're going to go to export and choose the self portrait 4. Same thing, binary STL. So what we're going to do next is we're going to just quickly jump into looking at Cura for a second to take a look at these 2, and then we're going to go into Cinema 4D to see what we could do if we wanted to do something more expansive or interesting there. So here we are in Ultimaker Cura, and this software is made for one purpose. Take the STL file and convert it into G-code based on which 3D printer you're using. So it does have to be updated to have the model of the 3D printer you're using. The difference right here is that the Ultimaker is actually what we use on campus, but at home I have a Creality Ender 3 Pro. And if I click down on here, you can actually see there's other options. You can go to the Ultimaker, right? So if I wanted to set this up to print it at school, I would choose the Ultimaker, right? And I would have to choose the right plastics. You can see that these are the specific plastics that it has available. And the only thing about this is that you'd have to check this and make sure that you are using the sort of plastic that is indicated. It is good to do this part of the Ultimaker part right on campus. Do it using one of the lab computers. Move your STLs to one of the lab computers so that you can quickly, easily do it. In order to get the file onto the Ultimaker, there are potentially a few different ways. The one obvious and easy one is to actually put a SD card into the lab computer, move the file to the SD card, and then the SD card loads directly into the 3D printer. Now, for me at home, I actually have a Raspberry Pi hooked up to my 3D printer, which controls the 3D printer, and it also has a camera hooked up to it. So once I'm 3D printing, I can actually watch the 3D print on a browser anywhere that I have wireless range in my home. So, but in this case, we're just going to kind of set it up like we're going to do it as if it's being done on school. So there's the Ultimaker. Now, my next step is I'm going to drag one of my reflexive low poly portraits in. Let's make it a little bit bigger. You can see on the side that there are some scale. Oops. Select. Did it export with all of the, yeah, there's pixelation in there. Now, some of the other options you'll notice up here, and if I go to preview, it'll show you what it's going to look like when it goes to print. It's not really showing very much there, so I'm not going to worry about it. Go back to preview in the selection. And so if you submit your file to FabLab, they will do all this because they will base it on the correct 3D printer that they will use. If you're going to do this in the lab computers, this is where this part matters. Okay. Some things you just don't change, or you, it'd be interesting to get, I don't have the exact variables for every piece, but I'm going to choose, 1 millimeter layer height is fine. Walls, it allows you to choose the wall thickness. I'm just going to leave it as it's sort of 1 millimeter. Infill becomes important. So infill is on the inside of the surface. How do you want to deal with it? And if it's really solid, it gets very expensive. And so what you want to do is take a look at a few of these and see how it affects the print time. I think in this case, we're going to go with, stick with triangles for now. Print temperature is usually stable. The material will stay at a 200. The build plate temperature is the actual heated plate that's on the bottom. If it's too cold, the pieces will cool down and separate. You need to kind of keep them heated. The print speed, I'm going to leave it at its default. Support becomes one of the other issues to consider. So what does that mean? So this is, just generate support. You know what? Let's leave it at that for now. Build plate adhesion is set to brim. So these are the different sort of, imagine this, that the plastic is not going to want to stick to the plate unless you give it something to stick to. So if I, let's see if it will actually start the slicing process then, or if there's a problem. So what it's doing in slicing is it's, and here we are. Now we get to see with the whole build plate. So this is only 1 hour, 40 minutes. Nice, tiny little piece to work with. Yeah, now you can see a few things. You can see the quality of that we're talking about with the pixelated sort of low poly look. You can see the build plate. So this is the brim around it. And this goes down first, which allows this to stick better to the plate. So you want to leave that in. And this other material is also this is meant to hold up their little arms, right? You can see hold up the chin the way I described. Hold up that end of the shell. All of those pieces basically are pulled off and then disposed of, and then you're able to kind of go in and clean up the rest of the model on the print. So that shows how that will totally work. Then you want to save to disk. So save that, and it will save it, you can see here, as G-code. So save that as G-code, and then you put that onto the card, and you move the card to the Ultimaker or other 3D printer. And now you can see this model. Now this model is obviously showing to be quite a bit bigger the way it is. And I would actually say opposite to the other one is I would want to scale it down. So in scale, if it will let me, I'm going to select scale. Will it? Slow process. But it is working as I scale that down. And the other way is I could come in here and I could actually decide, actually, you know what? 111 millimeters is not huge. It is 4 inches in every direction. It'll start getting expensive. Actually, let's bring that down to 50. Whoops. 50, not 5 million. And there we go. So now we're down to a nice scale, easy to manage. And we've already seen the way we can prepare things. So we can go to preview, no layers shown because you need to slice first. Let's slice it. 7 hours, 25 minutes. So you can see that that decision of doing them nice and flat made quite a difference in comparison to what it will take to print this model. And from here, then you'd be able to move this to the 3D printer. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to look at if we take those model pieces, bring them into Cinema 4D, and work on a different way of creating a low poly look. But if you prefer to just go right from Meshmixer right into 3D printing, then you've got everything you need. Okay, so here we are back in Cinema 4D, and we're going to go about doing a sort of low poly portrait using a similar sort of design, but it's going to have a very, very different look because of the way that Cinema 4D does this sort of low poly breakdown. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in that sort of self-portrait image. I'm just going to accept it as is. There it is. And I'm going to rotate it. Let's go into, well, you know what, whatever, 88. And then, why is it not giving me the, oh, there we go, coordinates, minus 90. Right, so now I know it's sort of set up straight-ish. How about I turn it so it's facing us a bit? There it is. Then I'm going to bring in, oh, sorry, so you can drag in your first model. If you drag in another model, it'll just open up another window. So what you need to do is go over to File, Merge Objects, and then you can start pulling them in that way. So I've got some sort of self-portrait files ready to go based on the stuff that I was getting out of Meshmixer. So let's take the shell. There's the shell, and I can move the shell over. And I'm not too worried about like that they're not all the same sort of like low poly exact look at this stage. It's not really a make or break moment for this right now. I just want to kind of get them close enough to each other that I can start to play with that. Then we're going to come over to File, Merge Objects, and let's bring in the totodial. So there's totodial. I want to rotate that guy around a bit. And then we're going to move him. All right, so he's over there. Now, let's go to the top. Actually, no, you know what? Sorry, let me go back for a second. Let's add I want to add in this cube, just so that we are kind of seeing all the pieces of the puzzle. This cube, of course, needs to be scaled way, way, way down. All right, now we'll go to the top view. And if you go to display and garage shading, then you can actually kind of see them all and press my number 1 so I can drag things around. All right, so now that I've got that lined up, I can easily come in and choose each of these. If I was going to keep them separate for long, I would change their names, but in fact, it's just not worth it. So first thing I want to do is move the shell over just to kind of in the area that I want it to be. Then I'm going to move the, I guess I could just move the totodial over. And then I'm going to move the bust over. Let's rotate it. And what if that rotation matters, the coordinates? No, you know what? I'm going to leave it like that for now. Let's use so you can see that I switched. It has its own axis, which you already said isn't very good. So I'm using the world axis so I can move it around. I should actually do that with the other ones too, but that's pretty much centered the way I'm thinking. Okay. Let's go back and see what this looks like in the front. All right. So looks like the one is embedded not too bad. We can even test that a little bit, and then we'll select a couple options to maybe choose what is sort of maybe the best kind of angle for the shell, or the different pieces. Shell's a real hard call, the best look for it, to tell you the truth. I don't know. The angles of it are awful because of its it has such specific directions for things. You know what though? Let's actually do that so we can maybe turn it just... I think it needs to be that way. There, that's not bad. Let's look at it from the top. Pretty good. That's pretty good placement actually. And then the totodial, we can maybe move it a little bit there. Oh, it's definitely too high. So that's not bad. I kind of, you know what? I'm not too picky on the direction actually. The other one's a little closer. We could do that. I almost want to scale it up a bit, but you know what? I think I'm just going to leave it. I don't want to get picky about this. I want to get you guys through it so you can kind of see just the whole process. Okay. So come back here. We can kind of look around, and it looks to me like everything is sort of touching everywhere else well enough that we could go forward with it just like that. Could even make this, you know what? I'm going to actually make the cube a tiny bit smaller. Yeah, you know what? Let's make the whole cube a wee bit smaller, and then let's actually maybe bring these in just a little tiny bit more. Yeah, there we go. Good. That's going to be what we're going to 3D print. All right. Now, what we're going to want to do with these is we are going to want to connect these objects into one object. So let's go over to get a connect object, and we're going to let's throw them all in. Okay, so we can kind of see now we've got this connected object. Now also, we're going to do a little bit of an experiment here. I want to add a polygon reduction. I'm going to put it in the connect object, and I'm going to drop all 3 of these shapes into it. The cube is already a low poly object, so we're not going to worry about it. Polygon reduction, and actually you can already see that it's kind of working. Polygon reduction, object 90. You know what? I'm going to leave it at 90. We will preserve UV boundaries. No, that was kind of maybe too much. No. And let's also take a quick look. So that's the meshes we're looking at right now, like super, super dense, right? So this reduction is really a good thing that we're going to do this. So let's see if we can press C on the whole thing. Interesting. So we've got the whole thing poly reduced right now, and let's see what that looks like if we select it and see all the... It's funny that oh, there we go. So now we can see the individual polys, and you can see how reduced it is, and that's pretty good, right? But I actually think we could go a lot further with the polys, and this is where I want to do the experiment. I want to see if we can do a polygon reduction inside a polygon reduction. Oh, there we go. That's what I'm talking about. So now we're talking about like really faceted low poly. That's exactly what I wanted to do. So I'm going to press C on that. We've got that object ready to go. And so I'm curious, you know what? Let's see what that looks like with the render window. Just because that'll give us an idea. You know what I love about this? I love that I can still kind of see myself in that like super low poly kind of look going on. So far I like this. I like where this is going. Let's try exporting this and see what it looks like when we see it in Cura. So let's first of all save this project. I'm going to call this one self-portrait 8. And let's, so now when we export here, we are definitely exporting it as an STL. I'm going to leave it as self-portrait 8. Let's pull up Cura. Cura always takes a little bit of time to load up. And I'm going to pull self-portrait 8 in, and there we go. Perfect. That is actually exactly what I wanted to see. This is such a different look for a low poly, right? This nice faceted kind of look, as opposed to the other, which has that bitmap look. I think they're both cool. I think there's a lot that could be done with them. And this is this whole idea of just the one way we looked at it was sort of like really incorporating the different reflexive totemic objects into the one portrait. The other is kind of treating them like where it's a collection of things that make up our lives, right? So different ways of approaching the project using some different software that's all incorporated, and this would be ready to go to slice and go to print, or you could just send this to the Fab Lab and be able to print it, and it looks like it's a good size. But let's just quickly jump back to our lecture. So there you go. That took us all the way from Meshmixer into Cinema 4D and then into Cura. You can see how you can both design and export all your files. And that's going to be it for this additional and very optional activity. This will be taking you into Christmas, and I hope you did get a chance to do this and try it out. And with that, have a great end of term.